Okay, can anybody on Zoom hear us in the meeting room?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Hey, can you just give us a countdown from 10 to 5, Nick, so we can set our sound level?
Sure. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Great, thank you. You're hired, Nick.
Sounds great.
Call the meeting to order. It's the first meeting of the month. Second meeting will be in 2 weeks. And first thing let's do is have the pledge to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'll remind everyone that when we have our public comments, and we try to be courteous to each other, and we also try to keep our comments under 5 minutes. I don't have a stopwatch here, but in any case, about 5 minutes. And all this is for Patton Township, a place for all. Next item is announcements. We didn't do announcements, but anything on the additions to the budget, to our menu.
Pardon? To the agenda?
Yeah. Agenda.
No, staff has no additions.
Does anybody else have a? Okay, we have none.
Nope.
And public comments. Does anyone have a comment?
Nope.
Any worries, concerns, fears, consternations, anything like that?
Nope.
Okay, there are none. So we'll move on. We're already up to page 3 on mine. Presentation and public hearings. We have a new item, and this is to discuss adoption of the fact it's a national adoption, Black History Month.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I would like to read the proposed proclamation.
And what we could do is read the proposed proclamation, and if you wanted to do that, that'd be great.
Sure, I vote for that. Thank you. This is a Patton Township proclamation. Whereas since 1976, every United States president has officially designated the month of February as National Black History Month to honor and affirm the importance of Black history throughout our American experience. And whereas the observance of Black history began in 1926 with historian, writer, and educator Dr. Carter G. Woodson, along with Minister Jesse Moreland, who sponsored the first National Negro History Week, which was celebrated in February and later in the 1960s as part of the observance that evolved into Black History Month. And whereas the theme for Black History Month 2023, Black Resistance, explores how African Americans have registered historic and ongoing oppression, have resisted I need new reading glasses, sorry. Explores how African Americans have resisted historic and ongoing oppression in all forms, especially the racial terrorism of lynching, racial pogroms, and police killings since the nation's earliest days, and efforts currently to roll back civil rights and legislate voter suppression measures. And whereas during Black History Month of 2023, we honor the first African-American black woman to serve on the Supreme Court, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And whereas with a presidential executive order to advance equity and racial justice, we celebrate the most diverse presidential cabinet in American history. And whereas we honor the endurance and contribution of African-American blacks and remember the courage to face reckoning and reconciliation with an opportunity to learn about black trailblazers on whose shoulders we continue to stand on. And whereas on what would have been Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 94th birthday, we continue to honor his memory and how he demonstrated through peaceful teachings and nonviolent ways that democracy is an enduring covenant that must be continually renewed. And whereas Black History Month is a time for all Americans to remember the legacy of African Americans who helped to build our nation, fought against prejudice in order to secure lives with dignity and opportunity for all citizens to be equal, to advance the cause for civil rights for all Americans, and to strengthen our families and communities that will be a place for all. Now therefore, Patton Township Board of Supervisors do hereby join the nation in honoring the contributions made by African Americans and recognizing February as Black History Month in Patton Township.
So that's a motion, correct?
I move that we adopt this proclamation.
I second.
It's been seconded. Any comments on the proclamation? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously, and I'll just add it's about time. And we're now up to public safety and the January 2023 police report. And the reason we'd be giving that here in February is it was just last month.
All right, thank you. The January Public Safety Report has been included in your materials. You'll see our officers conducted 147 traffic stops. We wrote 26 traffic citations, 25 parking tickets from one of our snow events. Most of those came from that. And then handled 39 criminal arrests. Under department notes, a 27-year-old male was arrested for theft by deception and theft. He had completed $2,795 worth of fraudulent returns and retained the money while he was working at a business in Patton Township. A 22-year-old male and a 22-year-old female were arrested for theft of lost or mislaid property. A customer in one of our stores requested $60 cash back in a self-checkout register and then forgot to take her money that she had requested. And this young couple came in after them to use the same self-checkout, noticed the money, unfortunately made a wrong decision, and took the money, pocketed it, and then left the store. A 55-year-old female was arrested for theft and receiving stolen property. She was in possession of a stolen TV from a store in Huntington, and she returned that TV at a store here in Patton Township and retained the $252 that she got from that return. 18 arrests were made for retail theft, 3 for driving under the influence. Our officers served 2 of the 6 warrants they attempted, and we conducted 18 vacation home checks. Our officers did use force during one incident in January. We were attempting to detain a male for a retail theft offense, and he ran from officers. The officers were able to catch up to the male and try to start to give him verbal commands, and one officer did point a taser at that individual. The taser was not deployed, and an officer eventually was able to grab onto the male's arm, and he was handcuffed without any further issue. There were no injuries reported by the male or the officers who were involved. Under community relations, Officer Tuskovich spoke to a few of the 8th grade academic literacy classes at Park Forest Middle School. about Center County unsolved crimes and about law enforcement in general. Officer Bardzell conducted a ride-along for one of our township residents. And Officer Tuskovich also spoke with the 8th grade health classes at Park Forest Middle School about drugs and alcohol. Training and activities, Officer Schaefer and Officer Tuskovich attended tactical response team training, and Officer Wolfinger attended crisis intervention team or CIT training. It's the week-long course that we offer here for our newer officers. And all of our officers began their yearly required in-service training. That includes 16 hours from the Municipal Police Officers Education and Training Commission, or MOPEC as we refer to them. And they are also completing 16 hours of in-house training as well. I had a pretty busy month. I attended training on development of a community anti-threat team. I attended training on utilizing the Pennsylvania Overdose Information Network. That's a database that PSP put together, that anytime we have an overdose or if we administer naloxone, we track that and put that information into there. And also training on human trafficking. I did attend the Center Region Emergency Services meeting and was the guest speaker at the CIT graduation. I attended the Happy Valley Business Association meeting, the Center County Chiefs of Police meeting, and the Center County Children's Advocacy Center Advisory Committee meeting. And I'm happy to report, I also met with a bunch of stakeholders, and there's a typo here. We are not trying to develop a human society police officer, but more a humane society police officer. So we've actually seen a need here in Center County for many years now to have somebody to help out with enforcement of, with animals, animal enforcement. So the Center County Commissioners are on board and are kind of spearheading this effort. I'm representing the police chiefs and the departments here in the Center Region, including PSP, to bring this resource into our county. So we're working closely with Blair County, who already has a program and working, but there'll be more to come. We had our first meeting, and it looks very promising that we'll have this position staffed hopefully by next year. So we're excited about that. We did have a performance report. I'm happy, this is a really good event here. Officer Tuskovich, Officer Suhu, and Sergeant Albright did respond to a residence for a unresponsive male. Officer Tuskovich arrived on scene first and found that the male was actually in cardiac arrest. So he began to perform CPR by doing chest compressions. Officer Suhu arrived shortly thereafter and brought in an AED and oxygen. So he was able to attach those to the patient very quickly, and they did administer 3 shocks with our AED. So our AEDs, when we turn them on, it prompts us to do 2 minutes worth of CPR, and then it'll analyze the heart to see if it has a shockable rhythm, and if it allows, it'll provide a shock to the patient. So our officers were on scene there for at least about 6 minutes doing CPR until EMS arrived on scene to take over. I believe they shocked the patient 2 more times, but prior to leaving the residence, he had a pulse and was breathing on his own again. So it was the quick actions of Officer Tuskovich, Suhu, and Sergeant Albright that a patient in cardiac arrest was able to be transported to the hospital for further medical treatment. Just a testament again to our training, the first aid training our officers receive, and the equipment that the township provides to our officers to make sure we have the life-saving equipment that we need out on scene. So really good, really happy story there. A couple notes that we received. This first one I actually had reported last month about an individual who was arrested. He had a co-conspirator. They were attempting to remove a change machine from a location in Patton Township. This is from the owner of that business, thanking Detective Haas for his hard work. And his quote, "I'm still amazed at how quickly you solved the case. Credit to you and your department." So Detective Haas did a fantastic job on that case. And it did only take him about 2 days to crack that one open, so he did a really good job. And just a thank you note from an individual who, unfortunately, during one of our last snow events, slipped off of Julian Pike. So our officers were able to get there and get her back on the road and on her way. So. And then lastly, we have our record list of calls for service. For January, we handled 489 calls. That's up from December, when we handled 462. 75 of our 489 were school checks, followed closely by 47, which were traffic incidents. And that completes my report.
Any board members have any questions?
Yes, Chief, are we still doing drive around the sinkhole residence?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I've got phone calls. The residents are still concerned about, their property still.
Yep,
And-
yeah.
And thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Our evening and midnight officers particularly are watching it pretty closely. But yeah, we are still keeping an eye on those properties.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
I'd like to commend Pam for being on top of this since day one. And it's been a long journey so far.
Thank you.
Thank you for the report then. And then we're up to Public Works operations. There are no items, but let me just point out, this doesn't mean that the Public Works people weren't doing anything. They were working hard. There are just no items that we're supposed to take care of tonight. Next item is Engineering, Planning, and Zoning, Planning Commission report.
Hello, I'm Sharon Collins, and I'm on the Planning Commission. And this, a couple of days ago, we were discussing the Geisinger Grays Woods Master Plan Amendment. And this is for the facility located at 132 Abigail Lane. And Mr. Lawson, he submitted the amendments. He broke it down into Phase 3, Phase 4, Phase 5, and Phase 6 that we were discussing. Phase 3 is construction of a two-story, 21,500 square foot addition to the existing Geisinger Clinic, which will start this year. Phase 4 will not take place till 2027, and that includes a third-story addition on the Geisinger Clinic structure, adding another 70,600 square feet of medical office space. And also converting some surface parking lot area to the rear of the clinic into a two-story parking garage, adding an additional 525 spaces. Phase 5, which won't happen till 2037, which would include a new 25,000 square foot detached metal offices building and all the infrastructure that's necessary and parking for that. And Phase 6, which won't take place till 2037, which is a new 11,500 square foot detached medical office building and all of that infrastructure and parking that is necessary for that. And we went over all the details, and Planning Commission recommended that conditional approval for the Geisinger Master Plan, and we're sending it on to you folks. And then the other thing that we talked about was request for zoning amendment to add climate-controlled public self-storage to the permitted use in the C2 planned commercial district. And there was a lot of discussion on this. It got very, very technical. And Leslie will be going into all of the details on that. And that was the one we had a split vote, but it passed for the definitions to be changed, and for the but we didn't have a split vote on the allowable use for the C2. I mean, I think we decided that should go forward, and that was unanimous, so. And that is pretty much the majority of everything that we discussed, and if you have any questions, I think Leslie will cover the things on the storage units, and Mr. Lawson will cover details on the Grays Woods Master Plan. Any questions while I'm...
Any questions?
For me?
Thank you.
Okay.
I guess the addition of new health facilities will be a real shot in the arm for the community. We're now going to go on to the discussion of these items and see if we want to vote on them. And the first one is the first one's listed here, and go ahead, Leslie.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Board Lawson submitted a master plan amendment to update the 2005 master plan for the Geisinger Clinic. It's located at 132 Abigail Lane in Port Matilda. It's on a 51.94 acre tract, and it's located in both the Office Buffer District 2 zoning and the I-99 overlay. Attached to your agenda packet this evening is the full agenda packet from the PC meeting on Monday, February 6th. There's a lot of information in there, but attached, there is a location map for the Geisinger Clinic and also the site, the master plan. This is page 4 of the master plan. This master plan proposes multiple additional phases. So phase 1 and phase 2 are already built. Phase 3 is scheduled to begin construction in 2023. It's a 2-story, 21,500 square foot addition. It extends Abigail Lane, reconfigures parking, sidewalk signage, bicycle parking, utilities, lighting, stormwater, and landscaping. Phase 4, 5, and 6 include a 3rd-story addition, 2 new detached medical office additions, as well as upgrades to the parking, including a parking deck, a large surface lot at the top of the site, stormwater, landscaping, sidewalks, et cetera. So with us tonight is Nick Argot from Borton Lawson. He's here to answer any questions if you had any on this master plan amendment. It did pass unanimously to be recommended for conditional approval pending the resolution of any outstanding staff comments. All of the comment letters that were received are included in your agenda packet as well.
Does anyone have any questions? Is anybody thinking of asking a question?
Is there anything else you wanted to say, Nick? You're muted.
I believe Leslie covered it well. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So the proposed action for the board tonight would be to set a public hearing. We're required by our regulations to hold that public hearing and take action on this plan no later than March 28th, so we could do the public hearing on March 8th or March 22nd.
Does anyone have a motion to have established the public hearing for March 8th?
Yeah, I agree. I concur, March 8th.
It's
For the
been
public.
moved. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Dan?
Yeah, I think March 8th will be fine for me. I have some minor medical procedure done, scheduled the week before, but March 8th should be fine.
Okay.
So I'll second the motion.
Hope that it comes out healthy and happy for you.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other comments?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. So it moves on to a public hearing.
Thank you.
And now, keep going.
Okay, so the second thing from Planning Commission. There was a request from Space Mart Self-Storage to the township recommending that a additional use be included in the C2 zoning district to add climate-controlled public self-storage. The request also wanted to define it as public self-storage facility with 60% or more of the floor area of the facility being conditioned and no more than 40% of the floor area being ambient drive-up storage. There was also a request to review parking requirements. The Planning Commission had an extensive conversation. If you look through the Planning Commission agenda packet that's attached, there were multiple questions that were asked trying to break this down into a less complicated manner of discussion points. And ultimately, it was a split vote 4-2. And what the Planning Commission is recommending to the board is to amend the zoning, the definitions, to include 2 additional definitions. One for multi-story commercial style storage facility, a structure with 2 or more floors designed and used for the storage of materials by multiple individuals for a fee. All materials must be stored within 1 or more structures on the site. Storage of materials outside of any structure is strictly prohibited. No office, sales, rental of goods or services, or industrial activities shall occur within or outside the storage buildings, nor shall any hazardous or otherwise dangerous materials be permitted to be stored in such facilities. No more than 40% of the units can be located on the first floor, and no more than 40% of the units can have exterior points of access. The second definition is for, I'm not sure that it's on here. It's specifically for self-storage facility, and this definition, we are just recommending it be moved. Right now, it's in the PAD zoning. We're just recommending taking the exact language and moving it to the definitions portion of zoning. So that is self-storage facility, one or more structures designed and used for the storage of materials by multiple individuals for a fee. All materials must be stored within one or more structures on the site. Storage of materials outside of any structure is strictly prohibited. No office, sales, rentals, or goods or services or industrial activities shall occur within or outside of the storage buildings, nor shall any hazardous or otherwise dangerous materials be permitted to be stored in such facilities. So you'll see there's a semblance and overlap of the definitions. The second amendment that was approved in that same motion was to include, quote, multi-story commercial style storage facilities as a permitted use in the C2 zoning district. And the third was this is in Saldo, so the first two were in the zoning section of the ordinances. The last one is in Saldo. They are adding a self-storage facility for, a multi-story commercial style storage facility with 1 per 50 units plus 1 per each full-time employee plus 1 for each loading zone under the off-street parking regulations. So that's a lot of detail for a couple of simple language changes, but all of that is in the, like I said, in the Planning Commission agenda. If you have any additional questions or you want me to go through in more detail, I'm happy to do so.
Leslie, I normally wouldn't ask this question, but since the vote was just one person away from being a tie, could we know like what the other people were worried about?
So I think a lot of the discussion had to do with allowing it in the C2. So Alex has, thank you. She has a map that shows where the C2 zoning is currently allowed in the township. And I think there was some concern about allowing it as a use. So self-storage facility is currently a use in PAD, and it's a conditional use in the industrial district. And if you look at the list for uses in C2, there's everything from parking garages to automobile service centers. There's an extensive list. I think their concern was how well a self-storage unit would fit into that, and if there would be, if there should be restrictions on sort of the aesthetics and such of the building. Hence the reason there's the second definition for the multi-style, so that it's not the typical sort of sprawled storage units that you see, that it's more compact and it's elevated and it has a slightly higher end appearance and draw to it.
There's another interpretation of that it's not in there now, as nobody thought of it when the first thing was written. And so, you know, if they'd have thought of it, maybe they'd have included that then years ago.
Possibly.
We don't know that.
Possibly. So the C2, it does allow all of the uses in the C1, so it really is quite an extensive list.
Okay.
We do have Mr. Pools here representing Space Mart. If you have questions for the applicant, we do have some photos of similar type of installations.
Okay, if you have any questions on this, don't store them, bring them up.
I do. Leslie, I have a couple of questions. First of all, do any of the other municipalities in the center region have comparable wording in their ordinances that allow multi-story commercial style storage facilities?
So if you go to the Planning Commission's agenda on page 4, I show the definitions for Ferguson College and Harris. There is no reference to multi-story, nor is there any reference to climate controlled. So climate controlled was something that we discussed at the Planning Commission. It's very difficult to define that. The Self-Storage Association doesn't even have a definition for it. It's difficult to determine what the range of temperature and humidity and all of those variables would be. And since we're doing this from a perspective of land use planning, it's difficult to be able to have a definition on how you maintain a building, if you will. So as far as the center region, there isn't anything that defines from a basic mini storage or self-storage definition.
Oh, thank you. Currently in Patton Township, we do have mini storage units both in industrial zoned areas and in the planned airports district. Is that correct?
We have an approved plan for one in the planned airport district. They got a plan approved, but they have never.
They never constructed it.
Yeah. And then we have the one just next to Amaron over here on
Right.
Atherton
That's
Street.
industrial.
So I guess the climate control issue is worded broadly, so it can include anything from just providing heat and air conditioning to somebody that might need something maintained at a certain interval of temperature and they want to install something to make sure it stays there.
Yes, so in my research, I've only found one municipality that has any reference to climate controlled in an ordinance, and they actually have an entire zoning district designated just for climate controlled storage, the whole zoning district. So I don't know that that is
For our
something.
needs, we don't need
Yeah.
to use the term climate control.
Correct.
So we've defined this as a multi-story building, so it has to be at least a two-story building. And that it has to have at least 60% of the units have to be accessed from an interior hallway. So with those two criteria, that's what distinguishes it from what I call the classic style of storage units, where you have several buildings and they're lined on both sides with garage door type entrances.
I got a follow-up. Alice, would you put the diagram of the C2 zone districts up there? Are there any vacant lots or spaces in the other C2 zone where it's possible to put in one of these?
Yeah, there's the area between Target and Kohl's, that's undeveloped. And then the area, can you scroll out to where the Home Depot is? Yeah, at the back of the Home Depot site, this is Home Depot right here. This is the Kish Bank, and there's a pad back here that is, that I think that's the location that Mr. Poole is actually looking at.
Correct, yeah.
So those are the two, and then there's a vacant parcel next to Sheets, right in here.
The wooded parcel there.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
No, they've got copies of those.
Yeah, we have copies.
Yeah.
No, nothing against your project. This has to do with thinking about the future. You know, if we approve this, then we're saying, okay, if any other vacant spaces or spaces that are not vacant that you could tear down an existing structure, we could put one of those there in one of those spaces, one of these.
Yeah.
So I just am trying to visualize if we start allowing this kind of a facility, where could they be put? We're talking about that wooded area next to Sheets, the middle property. That's the Kohl's, between Kohl's and Target. The bottom one here is what? That's the Patton Crossing and
Yeah, Patton Crossing.
a Walmart Plaza, is that right? So really, there's no vacant area there where we could put one of these, is that right?
Yeah,
Well, technically, Patton Crossing has a master plan that already has all the area dedicated for those. I think Mr. Poole wants to make a point about the difference between types of uses in the C2 also.
yeah, if you look at the C2 district, first thing, the three areas we're talking about, you need to be able to have a piece of land that's more affordable to build self-storage. I don't think anybody, if you look at it, Patton Crossing, we'd never put one in there, can't afford it. You're not going to see like the Walmart or the Home Depot or Lowe's knocked down to put a storage facility up. So if you look at it, there's really only a couple vacant parcels, one which we want to build on. Second, if you look at your C2, and I don't know if we have screen with the pictures up, storage facilities, and one we would do, will look a lot more attractive than most of the stuff that is allowed in the C2 district right now. Because you could take anything down and build a garage. If you look at your, and I think it's important, I think it's a good question, Dan, but if you look at your uses, on there, public and private garages, there's a lot of them, but dry cleaning, automobile service stations, ambulance services, billiard parlors, bowling alleys. If you, and I think you might have in your packet, but if you look at the pictures of a 2 or 3 story, multi-story self-storage, they're actually attractive. And I don't know if you have that, Doug, or not.
Alex is looking for it, so.
The other thing.
I think it's attached to the Space Mart letter. Yeah.
The other thing, Dan, I
Sorry.
think it's important.
The last pages of that, yeah.
When you look at self-storage, the one thing we've talked about here multiple times is you have the communities all talk about affordable housing and the need for it. If you look at whether it be Park Forest, look at Grays Woods, look at Top Trees, where you're going to see a lot of development going on, it's very easy to be able to get to this facility. And when we talk about affordable housing, what's happening today, lots are smaller. The affordability factor of townhomes or apartments where they really don't have the storage, this is actually providing for people who really can't afford to have a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot home and the extra garage and all, to be able to have their stuff. Because people today, and Elliot, you said that, they save furniture, artwork, furnishings from things that they've inherited. And when you look at what's happening in the developments we have, it's going to be something really that means a lot to the people, that they can have a place that's secure, because there's cameras, quiet, provides a tax base, and actually we're taking a piece of land that's not in use right now and making it viable. But I think a big thing that we've looked at is the affordability factor of people of whatever income it is being able to afford a certain, because they're all different size units. There's 5 by 5, 5 by 10.
Mr. Poole, I have no issue at all with the site you propose to put this at. I think that's an ideal facility for that particular property, being a dead end for, behind the bank and Home Depot. I always thought that would be a nice place for a garden center, but Home Depot already has a garden center, so nobody's going to put a competing facility there. But self-storage is fine for that place. I have no problem with that. I was just thinking about if you allow it, if we now allow it in C2, then any other C2 zone area can also put it in if they want to.
Correct.
But no, you make good points about, well, look at all the approved uses for C2 that exist now. No, I don't argue with that at all. I understand. I was just trying to make sure I thought in advance and projected where other possible places would be, and would that be okay? So we're making a major change to planned commercial. So I don't have a problem with that. Now, I also thought about, well, if we're going to do it in C2, why not C1? Well, clearly C1, no, that's where you put restaurants and, banks and et cetera. So C1's are probably not, it's not a proper zoning district for this type of facility. So in the end, Mr. Chair, I don't see any issue myself with approving this proposal.
Okay, I'm glad you asked the questions. Any other comments, questions, worries, fears, consternation?
No, I think our commission did a fine job in having questions toward this, but in the long run, they agreed to approve this. So I'm in agreement with our planning commission. And thank you.
This is the kind of thing where when the colonnade was first, how long has it been there, 25 years?
20,
Okay.
22.
Some people thought there'd be a theater in the middle of it, but where is it? It's not there. You put theater somewhere else, and so you think, well, should we reserve the space in case something that we might want more comes along, but it hasn't come along. And I think you're trying to look farther into the future. What if it does come along now? But I agree that what you said about this doesn't look like a problem. So is there a motion to?
Well, any other public comments?
Any other comments? Anyone watching this? If you have a comment, let us know. Anyone not watching, but just listening in the background?
Mr. Chair, I would
Right.
propose a motion that we approve these amendments to the,
Again, before the board can take action to approve, we have to have a public hearing. So the action tonight would be to schedule a public hearing
So,
for March 8th or March 22nd.
If,
I would move that we schedule a public hearing on this proposal on March the 8th.
oh, that works. I have a Geisinger board meeting on the 22nd, that's why, thank you.
March 8th?
Helps.
March 8th, second.
Okay. Any other issues on this? Okay, all in favor of establishing the public hearing on March 8th?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We don't hear that, it's okay.
Thank you, and I'd like to say again, Pam, you made a comment, I do it each time, but also it's important. The staff in the Planning Commission, the extensive amount of research that they did, I know it only shows up in about 6, 8 pages, the amount of research they did to bring the results to the Planning Commission, and there was a long discussion on it. It just says a lot, and Pam, when you made that statement, it says a lot to the staff, because it makes it a lot easier for the Planning Commission yourselves when they can get that kind of information, but it helped a lot. But I just want to say thanks to the Planning Commission and also to the staff.
Thank you for those
Thank you.
thoughts. Yeah. Okay, now. So where are we now? Are there-
7A.
Okay, there's 7A, and then there's a special thing on water coming up on 7C or something like that. 7A, administration. We're talking now about the regional solar purchase agreement.
Yes, just a quick review of where we are and what we're attempting to do. We joined this group of 15 entities, which are listed in the memo, back in 2018. Throughout 2020 and 2021, we worked to get a consultant online so that we could ultimately do an RFP for solar power and retail power, which we have done. We have gotten back the RFPs, and we are in process right now of negotiating with the suppliers. So one of the issues is back in May 25th, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting, we talked about coming up with a range of electricity to inform that RFP so that we could get an idea of how big of a solar array we would need to build for the group. At that time, we agreed that it would be between 50 and 90% of Patton Township's electricity that we would put towards the solar power purchase agreement. When they added everybody's ranges up, they got a range between 8 megawatts and 20 megawatts. There's a big difference between 8 megawatts and 20 megawatts. For a megawatt, I think it's between 4 and 5 acres per megawatt for this site. So this site could be up to a 100-acre site, or it could be as small as, you know, a 30-acre site. Given that there's that big of a spread, there's a big spread in the cost, obviously. So what the consultant who's negotiating would like to do is to narrow that, to tighten that range up, narrow that range, so that he can go in and say, okay, this is what really we're looking at, a much smaller range of how big the site is. It also gives us a better idea of some of these sites are in Center County, some of them are in Clearfield County, some of them are in Greene County. It gives us a better idea of which site the supplier could use. So I looked it over. I looked at our, as you know, our whole amount doesn't move the needle very much. We're under 2% of the whole project. So our amount doesn't move the needle very much, but I recommend at this point in time, looking at where the prices on the solar are, looking at what's happened with electricity, what they expect to happen with electricity. I think we can have some savings, plus hedge some of our risk a little bit if we go somewhere between 80 and 90% of our electricity. And that's my recommendation. The last thing that I would say, I wrote this up prior to the facilities meeting that happened yesterday morning. And in the facilities meeting, the facilities committee had recommended that COG use 75%, which I think we'll see in the finance committee meeting tomorrow, because I think it goes from facilities to finance. And it will be discussed again tomorrow in finance, but it looks like COG is going to allocate 75% of their electricity, leave 25% to the market, kind of hedge in case something happens where electric comes back down again. So in our case, in COG's case, you know, they're about 4.5% of the total project, whereas we're under 2%. So they'll get a little bit more savings to hedge. In our case, we'll get some savings. I don't know that we need to hedge that much. I never thought that we did need to hedge, you know, 25 or 50%, but I would recommend hedging between 10 and 20%. So if there's any direction that you can give me, I can go back to the working group, the Solar Power Purchase Agreement Working Group, with a consensus of what we think. And if we make that decision tonight, then I think that helps us, because I'm not sure there's anything else on the agenda for.
So basically, then you're amped about the whole idea.
I am very amped about the whole idea.
We're worried about the charges.
Yes, exactly.
But not enough to short circuit the plans.
I concur with all of that.
Just because of my poor hearing, you're recommending that we commit to 80 to 90% of our purchase?
Of our electric usage
80 to 90.
to be solar.
Yeah.
And that also helps us, since we do have a resolution to be carbon free.
Yes.
Yeah.
By 2050, that helps us with that. To go like 50% isn't going to help us with that resolution. So, you know, I don't have a problem with going 75 if you feel that, you know, that's what COG did, that's what maybe a more prudent thing to do is in our case. But I think with, you know, we do about a half a megawatt a year, less than a half a megawatt a year, 400,000 kilowatts a year. So it's not a big amount.
One more, a follow-up question. If, I recognize, we say we commit to whatever, 80 or 90%. That leaves us some flexibility to purchase some at a commercial rate.
Yep.
But we could purchase 100% at.
We certainly could.
At the solar power purchase agreement rate.
Yes.
If the commercial rate is higher. Or
No, we can't. We cannot do that. So, the way it will work is if we decide that, we're going to say 90%, okay, which at 400,000 is 360,000 kilowatt hours, okay? We cannot go over 360,000 kilowatt hours unless we purchase additional off of one of the other members. So once they come up with, the site's gonna only generate a finite amount of electricity, and that is going to be allocated between the 15 entities.
One more follow-up then. Why don't we purchase 100%?
That's up to the board.
I understand, but why would you want to have?
So here's where the risk comes, okay? There's risk, as you know, in doing anything, okay? There's a risk involved with buying everything off on the open market, okay? On the market because, the market goes up and down, okay? There's a risk with buying 100%. Right now, yes, solar, if I were to just look at it and you were to tell me, you guarantee me you'll never have to pay less on the market than we're paying for solar, sure, 100%, there's no risk to that. But there is a risk. The risk is that this current solar market is higher than what we were paying prior to the pandemic. Okay? So the big question in my mind is, does electricity, now the electric future economics, economists are saying it's never going to go back to 4.8 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay? We're never going to see that ever again. Okay? So if that's true, and we're paying, for the sake of argument, 5.5 on solar, and it's never going to go below 5.5, go 100%. Okay? But I think, as I said before, I came from a company that used a lot of natural gas. My last job was a company that baked a lot of graphite, a lot of natural gas. I remember when natural gas was $9 an MCF, and they were telling us never going to go below $9 an MCF. And as you know, we came out with fracking. We found natural gas in the Marcellus Shale. All of a sudden, the bottom drops out of natural gas, and we're paying $3. Okay, so I'm always leery to somebody that tells me you're never going to see that again. Okay, so if you believe that you're never going to see that, it's never going to go back that low again, then I would suggest or you don't care, we could do 100. Okay, someday, this is going to be a 15-year contract, 10 years down the road, when something comes up that we aren't expecting, that we don't think is ever going to really happen, that electricity cost drops down, and there's another board there saying, why, I won't be here in 15 years, Elliot will, but maybe not the rest of us. They'll say, what did those guys do? Why were they signing this for 100%? That's the only reason why I am hedging it a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit.
I got it, I understand now. Thank you.
We completely got unplugged.
Yeah, no, I just want to explain where my recommendation was coming from. And I do not have any issues with doing 100%. We can do 100%.
But like you
I
said- know
know that, for instance, the Water Authority, they're going to do 100%.
Who is?
The Water Authority,
State College Borough Water.
Oh, the Water Authority, thank you.
yeah. I'm sorry, that's my Pittsburgh E's coming out.
My hearing.
Yeah, well,
My brain was
I
tell-
do have a Pittsburgh accent. It's
My brain was telling me you were saying lottery.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out what lottery.
Well, they're gonna go 100%. I think the county might go 100%. There's gonna be places that go 100%.
What about the school board? They're the biggest.
The school district might go lower, it might be 50. They might, because they're looking purely at price.
Price.
Where other people are looking at price and green energy,
Carbon reduction, of course.
carbon reduction, yes.
But as you said, we don't really know what's going to happen in the future, and predictions always hazardous when it relates to the future.
Yes, exactly. If I knew what was happening in the future, I would have won $1 billion in the lottery, so. I hedged my bets there by not buying a ticket.
So what is the board willing to go along with if COG suggested? Are we willing to go with any number between 75 and 90 or what?
Or 100, or 50, or.
You'll have one more opportunity to change your mind, but at this point,
Yeah,
Just throw a number out.
this is just a
you
range.
need to provide us a little bit of
we-
guidance.
Exactly, yeah.
How about 85 to 90? It gives us a grace period and safety net, 85 to 90?
85 to 90 will be fine. Ms. Bouchard has a comment online.
75 to 90.
Okay?
75 to 90.
You like 75
Yes,
and
I do have a comment because I know that the discussion on Monday at the SCASD, the school board, was heading towards 15 million kilowatt hours, which would be 79%
Okay,
of what their electricity use is. And so I thought that that would be helpful information. And also I want to know there are two water authorities. One of them is the State College Borough. The other one is the College Township Water Authority. And I was just curious to know which of them
I was speaking of the state college. The
State
College
College,
Township
okay.
hasn't hinted at what they were going to do yet, but there's a big difference in usage between the State College Borough Water Authority is one of what we call the Big Five. It's one of the 5 largest ones, users in this, and the College Township Water Authorities far down the list. Very small, much smaller.
maybe smaller than Patton Township.
No, not smaller than Patton Township, maybe 50%, 50% larger than Patton Township.
Like 3% of the total instead of our 2%.
Exactly.
Okay. And I had one other question, and that is, at the State College Borough, at the SCASD, the school board, the question came up about what happens after the big drop-off in 15 years. And some of the discussions were, we could buy it ourselves, we could sell it to another, we could keep on, extend the contract, we could just drop the whole thing, or possibly the provider would sell off their interest to some other entity after the 15 years, or just, return it to, common land, farmland or whatever it is. What's your opinion on whether this makes a difference, and whether this is, good, the fact that there are all these options that exist at the end of the 15 years, or anything else about that, because I'm not clear about that.
Yeah, so the reason why we're limiting it, our contract can go out to 25 years. The useful life, my understanding of these solar arrays are between 25 and 30 years. So, obviously a developer's going to want to lock in somebody for the useful life of these solar arrays. Okay, because that guarantees their return on their investment. Us going in.
Okay, so just let me stop you for a minute. That means that it'd be quite likely at the end of 15 years that they would offer us another 10 or 15 years if they're making money. And if
I
they're happy.
think that it depends on, well, first of all, what I was going to say is by only asking for a 15-year contract, the price is a little bit higher because they are going to hedge against the fact that after 15 years, they don't have anybody to sell the electricity to. Then at the end of 15 years, it becomes, if we put in the contract that we can automatically sign on extensions as you would do in any other lease, a building lease with options at the end of the lease, we can do options where they would be required to sign an extension with us, maybe 5-year extent, 2 5-year options, or again, it becomes a risk assessment. You just say we renegotiate with them after 15 years, and then it becomes whether they have somebody else that they can sell the electricity to that they're going to be bidding and negotiating against you. So yes, so I think it's to our advantage to only do the 15 years. I think that helps to hedge a little bit of our time risk as opposed to our risk with the cost, but the risk with the time of the project. If we went 25 years, if we got into a bad, if something happened that the price of electricity came down after 10 years, we would still have 15 more years of a contract that would not be good for us. So we looked at the risk of going out too long. We looked at the risk of the price. The project management group, as I said last meeting, has 4 accountants on it, and we're constantly talking about the risk. So I think that having the multiple options available to us is to our advantage.
Okay, so the contract is going to be negotiated so that we will have multiple options depending on what we think is going to be advantageous to us at the end of those 15 years.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm not sure that the contract will state all those options, but the contract will either say we're willing to go with an extension or renegotiation.
Okay. That's up to, I guess, the people who are experts like Green Sky Development Group to recommend what would be the best thing.
Exactly. And he's been through this rodeo before, so we're...
And just one other question of curiosity, and that is, at the school board hearing, there was much discussion of how good it would be if it were in Solar County, because the students could go out there for internships and they could do, maybe apprenticeships and things like that. And I was just curious, now that you have mentioned that in Center County and Greene County and Clearfield County, there are properties there are considering, depending on how much the commitment of the 15 partners that are involved in this are. Do you have any idea whether the one in Center County is small or medium or large or anything like that?
I do, and there's different sizes in Center County, but during our interview process with the prospective suppliers, both of them have multiple locations. So they do have, even if we were to go, say, with Greene County, they do have local locations that they will allow the school district to have those opportunities. So that
How far
would be,
is Greene County from us?
Greene County has gone towards Pittsburgh, gone towards south of Pittsburgh, I believe.
Okay, well, I'd just like to state from the point of view of somebody who's the grandparent of a senior at State High, I would really like to see a place that's closer than Greene County or Clearfield County.
Yeah,
I'd really like to see.
and that is high on our priority list, is that it would be in Center County. But I could certainly give you a call, and we could talk about it some more if you want to.
If I think I want to talk to you some more about it, I think I could probably look up your phone number
Yep,
at the...
you can find me, just call me here at the office, I'm here every day.
Good, thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
Your presentation, by the way, on the 26th, which I reviewed today because I missed it on the 26th, I was at another meeting, was so clear about what the advantages of going as high as we can are. And I didn't really understand that after the meeting at the school board. I did understand that after seeing your presentation. I wish that all the people in all these 15 entities could see your presentation, because maybe that would get them to do and go as high as they think they can go. And besides that, you know, I'm here because I'm special projects chairperson at the Sierra Club, the local Sierra Club, and also active member of the Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition. And we aren't discussing anything about saving the planet, you know, and cutting down carbon emissions, and every entity has got its targets. So, you know, all of that stuff is really weighing on my mind also, and maybe it's weighing on the minds of other people here, even though they're not really talking that much about it. So, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you.
One question I have for the rest of the board members, should we allow a large enough interval that if COG votes for 75% and we've said 80 or 90, are we going to be allowed to vote for 75?
Just to reiterate something that I said in the meeting, and I should have said here, is at this point in time, that number is just for negotiations.
All right.
We are not committing to anything. We can turn around when it comes time to make the commitment and say 100% then, or we can say 75% then. This is just to narrow down the negotiation. So we're not committing, so I'm not using the word that we're committing anything, because we're not committing until we sign on the dotted line.
We're not going to be electrocuted from...
Exactly. So this is just for a better idea to narrow down the size of the project. But we certainly can come back, and I will be coming back to the board again and saying, okay, now the rubber's hit the road, and we have to decide, are we going to continue with this, actually buy the solar power once we see the price, once we know what the cost is going to be, and et cetera, and then we can verify and commit to the amount of electric usage. So we could certainly come back with 100% at that point in time.
And so one other thing is that our $15 now in 15 years isn't going to be, or whatever money it is, isn't going to be worth that much.
Yeah.
Then. So, I mean, the person that helped originate Penn State, Mr. Watt, was talking about selling land for less than a couple of dollars an acre.
Yeah.
Did you know him personally?
I didn't, but we had to talk about all the people that helped to form Penn State and strengthen it at a Rotary meeting.
Elliot, I think Futon has a question.
Sutan, do you have a question?
Elliot, I'm wanting clarity on your initial question about what we go up to and what COG will do percentage-wise.
So what I said, and you might have missed it, Sutan, because I'm not sure when you came on to the meeting, but What I said was at the Facilities Committee meeting on Tuesday morning, COG has, I'm not going to use the word committed, COG is using 75% of their electric usage for negotiation purposes. So they're saying that they will put 75% of their electric usage into the solar power array and 25% into the open market.
Okay.
So our question is, what number do we want to give them, though our number is not really going to move the project by that much, but I want to give them a smaller range than the 50 to 90 we gave them originally.
The other thing, Suzanne, is that if COG insists on voting for, suggesting 75, we're not going to say, we're not going to do it because it's 5% lower than what we thought at our meeting.
Right.
So that none of this is rigid right now.
None of it is rigid. So it's not rigid until we negotiate a best and final price, and then I'll be coming back to you with the best and final price and saying, okay, this is what it looks like it's going to cost us, this is what it looks like, we could save, or it's going to cost us an additional to go solar or whatever, and then we would be asked to commit the amount.
We've been asked to vote on this now, or just?
If you can give me a number to give back to the working group.
I'm all ears. What's the proposal?
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, Larry, I agree with Joan too, and we had shared this during the last meeting. You did a fantastic job presenting information on this, and from that, it really had me thinking I'm fine with doing 100%. And so if we're not necessarily locked in, and I wonder if we're saying, let's do 100%, and, this company really sees that we're bought into this, would that affect, for example, drop that rate then? Again, I know we only account for a small proportion of this, but it's really thinking too about if we're showing the other municipalities or stakeholders that we want this, can that then lead the way and model for them to maybe go a bit higher? So for me, I would be like, I'm fine with saying 100%. We're not completely locked in right now, and if we need to come down, that's fine. But playing around with a range of 5 percentages points, it just seems.
Yeah, and 10% of our usage is only 40,000 kilowatt hours a year, so it's not a lot. Doug?
The developer of the array is going to be driven by numbers, period.
Yeah.
So however many kilowatt, he's got a price that he has to amortize over 15 years. And he's going to take the number of kilowatt hours that are committed, and he's going to divide his price by those kilowatt hours, and that's going to be our price per kilowatt hour. So if we want to say 100%, we do it for our own purposes. I wouldn't read anything other than anything else into the situation. So if the board wants to say 100% today, that's fine. It's not going to move the needle. Between 80 and 90, 100% of ours is not going to move the needle at all on the final price.
It's going to be those 5 big users.
And so again, I get that we're small, sort of like fish in this pond. I think just for the modeling and our own values, I would be fine with saying 100%, just in case, these other stakeholders are like, oh yeah, Patton Township is also, and the water, authority is 100%. Let's try to, move up and maximize that and then come down later if need be. But that just feels better to me, 100%, or just one clear number, 90%, as opposed to, 85 to 90.
That's fine. That's fine.
I just need to know what I should be pushing at exec. So what I'm hearing is something like 90%, or?
Right, we just need to make a decision for Patton Township tonight. That's all we need to make a decision on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I.
Yeah, because.
And you'll make a different decision for COG.
Yeah, for COG, that's a different decision.
Oh.
This is just a decision for just Patton Township.
Okay.
So I would say I'm fine with 100%. If people feel comfortable, 90%, that's also good. I just prefer exact number as opposed to just a range.
Okay,
I'm buying Sutan's argument. I think, at this point, since we're not committing to a percentage, that this is a good chance to make a statement.
That we're all into this.
Yeah, so I would agree with Sutan. I'd say let's submit 100% is
that our consensus then?
Consensus. I agree.
Okay.
Okay, 100%. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'll see you once negotiations are over.
Thanks again for the excellent reporting. Okay, now, we're up to 6E, or there's a water issue in Benner Township. Doug, you want to fill us in on that?
The anti-discrimination regulations?
No, the water issue in Benner Township.
The water
That's
issue
not
at
yet.
Benner Township?
It is?
No,
What
that's
is-
item 9A.
9.
Oh, 9A, all right, I'm
So
sorry.
we're at 7C now.
7C.
All right.
We're ready to move forward.
Okay, 7B.
C.
So we've been talking about the anti-discrimination regulations and establishing a regional human relations commission. I thought tonight I'm going to run through the actual regulations real quickly, just so, because I don't think we've done that yet. Betsy Dupuis available too if you have any legal questions. She's worked with Ferguson Township on the work they've done. We're going to be looking at exactly the same thing that State College Borough and Ferguson Township adopted. So if you can pull up item 7C1, Alex, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Oh, you might have to go to the T drive. I added it. It's on the T drive. Yeah, sorry.
While you're thinking about, is there any reason for us to want something different than our neighbors?
I can't do any reason to. I mean, at the end of the day, we're gonna have a regional commission that's gonna be looking at these, so there's some advantage to having the same regulations across the board. Obviously, the managers have been working to get to one set of regulations, but each board can make their own choice if they would like to. So, thank you, Alex. But I just want to touch on a few things. Obviously, on page 1, item B there, the intent of this is to prohibit discrimination in employment, public housing, real estate related transactions. That's mostly related to financing and loans based on a whole list of things that starts with race, color, religion, ancestry, and goes all the way through, including everything, includes the gender expression and things like that. If you go down to item D on page 1, it's policy of the municipalities that the Regional Human Relations Commission shall have jurisdiction to hear complaints. So there's going to be actually 2 ordinances that we're going to end up dealing with. One is to establish these regulations that prohibit discrimination, and then the second one will be to work with State College Borough to establish the Regional Human Relations Commission and agree to how that operates. So if you go to page 2 of the anti-discrimination, I just wanted to make note that one thing that we have that's included in these local regulations, which is not included in state regulations, is issues related to assistance animals. That's item C there on page 2. So this is not service animals, but assistance animals. Service animals are typically certified to do particular tasks. Assistance animals are animals that perform disability-related functions, and you can read that, who include help with a wide variety of tasks for people, but also provide emotional assistance to persons with disabilities. That was an item of
It's very important to those people that they have those animals.
Yeah, so, and it will probably come up most often in housing-related issues where somebody has an assistance animal, but a landlord may not want or may not recognize their need to have that, and there may be a conflict between the landlord and the tenant about having that assistance animal. So Through these regulations, we'll be able to help people navigate those situations. One of the major issues that we'll be dealing with, if you go to page, I think, page 5, a lot of things have to do with, besides housing and employment, there are public accommodation issues. There's a definition for public accommodation, item W there. Basically, it's any place that's providing services or goods to somebody and invites the general public in. So that's a place of public accommodation. And places of public accommodation have to provide service to people with disabilities and can't discriminate based on people's, that long list of issues that we looked at. If you go to page 7, Alex, there are a few exemptions and exceptions to these things. A and B deal with religious exemptions, that we can't conflict with some religious issues. Item C, our local regs can't apply to state or federal agencies or offices, so we can't go in and tell the federal government what to do. Item D exempts dorms from various things that have to do with familial and marital status. And item E recognizes there that there are certain neighborhoods that are legally age restricted. Those are the ones that typically are providing housing to persons 55 and older. Those are enabled by the state, and we can't contradict those regulations. If you go to page 8, towards the bottom, section 4, it's the start of the actual, what is unlawful. There's 4 major categories that will come up. Section 4 covers housing. Section 5 covers public accommodations. Just talk briefly about that. Section 6 talks about real estate transactions, but it primarily has to do with loaning practices and mortgage practices, that there cannot be discriminatory practices on who you loan to, who you loan money to, or whose home you're willing to finance, and who you might deny for reasons other than their financial ability. And then Section 7 has to do with employment practices, again, outlawing discrimination based on that set of factors in employment cases. If you go to Section 11 on page 14.
So if a bank quietly has a discriminatory practice for its national or state banks, they can't have those be in effect here because they'd be unlawful.
Yeah, I mean, there are federal and state laws against discriminatory practices. And we're not looking at large, class action cases and stuff. This would be probably where somebody, we're a small town, right? And the longer you're here, the smaller the town gets, right? So, if somebody knew for sure that they were being discriminated against by a local lender or something, and they had a fairly firm case of why then that's something that we could deal with here. Large institutions doing, loans, and if you're looking for discriminatory, I'm not going to go into those issues, but maybe Betsy, but we're not looking at trying to establish, I can't even remember the term, but anyhow, so we're looking at, this would be a local thing.
I just don't want to make sure we're not inadvertently allowing loopholes.
No.
Okay.
I don't know, Betsy wants to weigh in on that. No.
Betsy?
Now, we're pretty much, this is belts and suspenders on top of federal and state law, so.
Yeah, I don't think there's any gaps here. I mean, I do think Doug pointed out a couple of things that exceed what the PHRC currently enforces. That's the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. As a practical matter, we'll just have to see what happens and what cases are brought before us. But I think in terms of the questions about lending practices, I think some of you are probably aware there's a case out in California that's just gone through the courts. I mean, I think there are already people involved in that. So I doubt that'll be, something might come to us, but we might refer it elsewhere. I think it's going to be more likely, as Doug said, a landlord-tenant matter. potentially an employment matter, although a lot of those tend to go a different route, but that's probably what we're looking at.
Yeah, we're not looking at anything, the term I was looking for was disparate outcome, where you recognize based on many instances that there may be some discriminatory practice that may not be on its face discriminatory, but the outcome tends to lean in one direction or another based on people's characteristics. So that's called disparate outcome sometimes when you look at things.
And Doug, I would just add that the intent here is that the commission is going to respond to complaints. It is not going to have an investigative process, so it will not of its own initiate complaints. These are going to be complaints brought to the commission by community members. There's a mediation section in that specific ordinance, and I think the intent was always that this would be an opportunity to maybe mediate issues rather than have them go to the mat, so to speak.
Joan,
Yeah.
Did you have a brief comment?
Yeah, hang on. Yeah, I'm not muted, am I?
No.
Okay, I would like to talk about the assistance animals, and I would like to say how important that part of it is, because I happen to have my younger son who has an assistance animal. He lives in Texas. The laws of Texas do not permit discrimination against people with a regular service animal like a seeing eye dog and people who have animals for other means and reasons, like they can't hear and, you know, they're going to let the person know when a telephone rings and stuff like that. I am sure we do not have any laws like this in Pennsylvania. And with things the way they are in Harrisburg, unless there's ever a chance that we get both houses of the administration and also the governor on the same page, and I think that this is an important human rights issue, and I'd like to live to see this, but I rather doubt it. It's going to be up to people in the local areas to have protections like this. And this means that my son can go into a store like Walmart with his assistance animal, which is a dog. He can go into housing, for instance, if he was going to rent a house, they can't discriminate against him for that. He's not in a position to do that. So he's living in motels, he drives for Lyft. And they can't discriminate against him for his animal. And even Lyft and Uber and so forth, they can't discriminate against him because he has his assistance animal. And he would be on the street without these protections. And I'd like to see anybody in that kind of situation, whatever their cause of needing the animal would be, I'd like to see them have a chance to be able to live a normal life, and that we would back them up if there was a complaint, and hopefully it would never get to the courts. You know, that would be the end of it. So I didn't intend to speak on this. I wasn't even really sure what this was about, but I stuck around, and I'm glad I did. Thank you very much for listening to what I had to say.
And thank you for offering. Is there anyone that disagrees with anything here? No. So we want to have those protections in.
Yeah. So are we moving forward to the March 8th to get this public hearing and pass finally?
If the board's ready to take action on this, we'll prepare it and we'll take the State College Borough language, put it into proper format for a Patton Township ordinance, and get that advertised and ready for a public hearing on March 8th.
Is that a motion then?
That's a motion.
Okay, it's been moved. It's been seconded. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's done. I hope it's done. I mean, I hope it's okay. Now we're up to 7D.
D.
More scintillating and exciting local government. we've been working through these, and I promise you, there may be one or two more that I have to bring to you. But we're nearing the end on this process, and I thank the board for their patience and their input as we work through this process of getting our code updated and improved and more user-friendly, which is ultimately what we want to do. So the first item, if you go to page 8 on the agenda.
It's going to take more than a few minutes, then maybe we need to take a 3-minute break.
I'd like a break.
We're going to take
That's fine.
a 3 or 4 minute break. Good.
Okay.
With the TV, bang that. Then your gavel.
Oh. We're back in session.
Okay, so we have 5 items we'll run through here. They're on page 8 of the agenda, starting with number 1, which is always a good place to start. General code has recommended that we renumber the chapters within our code book. Currently, we go from chapter 1 to chapter 175, and they are recommending that we go from chapter 1 to chapter 425. The reason for that is so we have room in the future as we find new things that need to be regulated. We'll have places in the alphabetical list where we can insert new chapters. Staff did review this and concurs with general code that we should renumber per their recommendation. So the question is, does the board agree with the staff recommendation?
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds like regulation creep to me, but I don't have any argument with it.
Well, I'll put that down as a yes then.
Yes.
The next one is, has to do with something we added a couple years ago, small cell wireless facilities. There's no penalty section in that, so general code recommends that we add a section on civil enforcement, which is how we do most of our zoning regulations. Staff agrees. Staff recommends adding the civil enforcement penalty as shown, and asks if the board agrees with the staff recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, that's agreeable.
Okay. We're now talking about items that have to do with the zoning hearing board and the municipality's planning code.
Well, let me stop. Sutan, if you have anything to add to any of this, just speak up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, without going into the details, section 175-65B, general code recommends deleting this section, would make us match the current regulations in the municipality's planning code related to jurisdictional criteria for the zoning hearing board. Staff concurs with that recommendation, and we ask if the board concurs with the staff recommendation.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, all right.
Again, having to do with the zoning hearing board regulations and how they match up with the municipality's planning code. Recall the municipality's planning code is the state law that regulates zoning, subdivision, and zoning hearing board activities. General code is suggest we replace section 175-67 with the language that's currently found at section 914.1 of the municipality's planning code. Staff concurs with that recommendation. We ask if the board concurs with staff recommendation.
I agree.
I agree.
Fine. Sutan, do you have a question?
I agree.
Oh, good, okay.
The last one for tonight has to do with some regulations that were originally adopted in 1964, have to do with pest control. I reached out to State College Borough Health Department, which does our inspections and regulations and does our health inspections whenever we need them, and asked them if they use anything like this or what regulations they currently use. They noted that they use state regulations and that to enforce all these things, and they no longer use anything in local law for enforcement. So the staff recommends that we repeal chapter 118 in its entirety, and we ask the board if they agree with the staff recommendation.
I agree.
Is that okay? Okay.
Thank you. That concludes tonight's excitement for that subject.
Which brings us to 7E, right?
Correct.
This is an important deliberation right here. The suggestion is that since we have nothing to talk about, that we not have a meeting on the 22nd.
It's all right with me.
All right.
Okay. And we can't say that we can impose our own leap year day because that'd be the 29th and there is no 29th. And they should put the extra day at the end of June when the weather's nicer anyway, but that's my own editorial.
Sutan, are you agree?
The people elected us to show up and work. But yeah, I agree.
There is actually a weather historical note from the 1700s. There was one local legislative body in Connecticut, and there was a big storm, and it was like extremely dark at noontime. And one of the people on the board said, since this is so scary looking, let's all go home. And this other person argued, this may be the end of the earth, or maybe it isn't. But if it is, I'd rather be here seen, caught here at my desk, than having left the office. So I'm opposed to disbanding. That was their thought. All right, 8.
We'll make required notifications that the February 22nd meeting is canceled.
Consent agenda.
5 items on the agenda for tonight. Approval for the next salt contract for the next year. We're not changing the amount that we're obligated or committing to buy at 1,250 tons. We've used that amount for the last several years. There's an easement agreement and a resolution for traffic signal equipment for the entrance to the Penn Highlands Micro Hospital. Minutes from last meeting, voucher report from last month, and then a resolution for applying for a redevelopment grant from Top Trees Resort that we talked about last fall.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved, it's been seconded and thirded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're done. Okay. Now we come to the exciting part of the evening, the manager's report.
Yes, sir. Just announce that the board did meet in executive session on February 2nd. They met with their consultant, GovHR, and reviewed matters related to filling the manager's position in the near future. For a manager's report, development update was included in your agenda package. We'll respond to any questions you might have on that. Second item under correspondence has to do with PFA contamination for groundwater in Patton Township. We've been providing information, or DEP's been providing information for probably about the last year and a half. We've been relaying information to residents in Patton Township who are in the area of the issue. So there was an update from DEP included with that, and then some FAQs about some of the issues related to PFAS. You've probably seen information. The state just recently passed some new water quality regulations governing PFA contaminations, and it's been I've seen it frequently come up in several different instances. There's an issue, I guess, a lot of firefighters' uniforms, and currently some of the older ones contain PFAS. So there's a push to get all new gear for firefighters to make sure they're not being exposed to these things also. So if there's any questions about that, I'm going to really refer you to DEP. I can't remember if it was Cheryl Sinclair is the person at the DEP regional office who's been running this investigation, and she's an excellent resource if you have any questions about it.
So can we get her information?
Yep, I will.
Thank you.
I usually include it, but for some reason it didn't show up on the update this time. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for requesting that. Anything else?
Just a couple things. CAT has sent out a press release celebrating the retirement of their longstanding board chairman, Dr. John Spachalski. And then we did receive some information from Senator Lango Holk and his staff about potential resources for residents who've been displaced by the sinkhole. And other than that, we'll be closed on February 20th, April 7th, May 29th, and PSAT's conference is coming up in April, and primary election day is May 16th. And that's the end of my report.
Doug, do we have any person that is going to replace Akata.
Well, that's, John Spachalski was Ferguson Township's representative.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's been replaced or not.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, that brings us to committee reports. I didn't follow the rules of presenting this first, so you could have included it here, but at the Lucy meeting, there was a long discussion about what to do about the fact that the census is believed to be undercounting our number of people here versus the idea of what to do about it. It's expensive to ask for the census to be redone, and so it may not be productive to do that. And I think the consensus was that we weren't going to do that. I guess at the next meeting we'll decide how we are going to respond to this thing in our actual planning. But we had a long discussion about that. Is that a reasonable summary of it? Okay. So who's next here? On any other committee reports need to be talked about?
I know Valentine's Day, we have our public safety meeting on the 14th, so after the 14th, I'll submit our public safety.
Do you know where to get the best cards for Valentine's Day?
No.
It's from the cardiologist.
I walked into that.
Anything for finance?
We meet tomorrow morning.
All these other meetings are.
Yeah, on our agenda, just to let you know, January meeting and tomorrow meeting, we're discussing the budget process planning for this year, for the 2023 budget process, so that the COG, finance people and exec directors and agency directors have an understanding with the finance committee of, our expectations in terms of when things have to be done and presented to finance committee during that whole budget process that's going to occur, from throughout summer and fall.
Thank you for your excellent work on that.
You're welcome.
Any other committees need to be discussed? They're all the future meetings. Okay, that brings us, I guess, to other business. Is there a move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, then we are adjourned. We're at 7:16.